Well, I don't think any of us could have dreamed what's happening and what's happened. We knew the signs, 50 years of think tanks working towards this, but I think when people say, well, is this as bad as the 60s? I think, we couldn't have written this. It makes the 60s look like a garden party, Really, it does.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. She doesn't need an introduction, but I wrote one, so why not? Here it is. Joan Baez, born January 9th, 1941 in Staten Island, New York, is an influential American folk singer, songwriter, and activist. Known for her clear soprano voice and commitment to social justice, Baez became a prominent figure in the 1960s folk music scene and an icon of the civil rights and anti-war movements. Her early music was deeply influenced by traditional folk songs, and she gained recognition with her debut album in 1960. Throughout the 60s and 70s, Baez released a series of highly successful albums, including Diamonds and Rust, 1975, which featured her poignant reflection on her past relationship with Bob Dylan. Despite personal and professional challenges, she maintained a prolific career, influencing generations of musicians and activists. She's the subject of at least 2 documentaries, one under the PBS umbrella, American Masters, the other more recent one entitled I Am a Voice. She has published 4 books, including an early memoir, Daybreak, in 1968, a new and expanded autobiography in 1988 called And a Voice to Sing With, and then just a couple of years ago, a book of upside-down drawings. Am I Pretty When I Fly is the title, and of course her latest, When You See My Mother, Ask Her to Dance. So, except for that last paragraph about her films and books, her intro was from ChatGPT. That's right, artificial intelligence, my nickname. So that was all right for a robot, but let me personalize it, all right?
Let me personalize it.
Here's the thing, Joan and I have the honor of sharing a mural. It's my honor, actually. It's the huge Summer of Love mural that wraps around Haight and Clayton streets above a Middle Eastern restaurant, and it includes a panel featuring Joan performing at an outdoor concert. And then there I am, a few feet away, probably making a bootleg tape. But until an event last spring, Joan and I never met. Yes, a hello at a birthday party years ago for the late great photographer Jim Marshall. Quotes by phone in 1974 at the end of Bob Dylan's tour. And in 1986 for a chronicle piece about her late sister, Mimi Farina. But that was it until a 50th anniversary gala for Bread and Roses last May at the Sweetwater in Mill Valley. Yes, Bread and Roses, which brings live entertainment for people in hospitals, jails, senior care centers, and elsewhere, was created by Mimi. I was invited to co-host the event with Joan. I was told, though, that she might show up, she might not. She might sing, she might not. Well, she showed up, and she sang, and we had a ball. Moments after I did my impression of Bob Dylan, she marched out and did hers. There. Take that. This was a lot more fun than appearing in a mural together. And now here we are together again, 2 Capricorns for the price of none. Please welcome the wonderful Joan Baez.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, dear.
Thank you. No, I insist.
Pretty glaring lights, but I think that was a standing ovation, Joan. We're off to a good start.
I don't do anything without bright lights in my face.
Great to see you. So most of the poems in this book come from a period from about 1991 through about 1997. But how long have you been writing poetry?
Since 1991.
And before that, did you think of yourself as a potential poet? Had you liked the form enough as a kid to want to maybe?
Never thought about it. I mean, I never thought about it.
So beside poetry, since you were
I'm
not
really
thinking
not
about
right
that,
to be interviewed. Just go ahead.
give us some more water, please. So since you were not that into poetry necessarily before the early 90s, were you writing in journals? I know you wrote songs and other creative forms. You were drawing probably as a kid.
I was doing more drawing, yeah.
Yeah.
And writing backwards and doing anything to keep myself amused when I was in school.
Uh-huh. And why writing backwards? Was that because nobody else did that?
I don't know, maybe. When I think of it and when it started, it was really trying to stay awake in class.
Oh.
And and I learned all these different things. That's probably when I started drawing upside down. And squeezed through and graduated from high school, either because of or in spite of writing upside down and backwards.
And then you turned that into a book, as it turns out. Besides we're going to be hearing you do a number of your pieces from the book. And I noted, after reading them all, that there wasn't too much that was political. And Joan is political and social and cultural. And so now I hear backstage that you do, in fact, have a poem that's relevant to the times.
Yeah, I do. And I think in order to put this whole thing in a context, we have to, realize this crashing week we just had after the crashing 50 years of getting ready for it. And I did have one poem that wasn't written back then. And so I'll read that off here for you.
Okay.
Oh, let me find it. Okay. This week really has been something, hasn't it? So, okay, this one is called, I guess I wrote it probably a couple years ago. It's called Mariupol. Here we go. Mariupol, city of light. Here in my comfortable home with its bright wood and terracotta tiles, tapestry rugs and soft couches, familiar windowsill niches opening to the edge of glory and roses of heaven. The winds of war came peevishly, whispering and rattling my solitude with dispatches from distant Ukraine. We come from Mariupol, they murmured. Who wonders why you've neglected her so soon, why you gasped in horror so briefly, then went on with your life and left her so exposed? Mariupol, they said, was a jewel, teeming with humor and love, courage and industry, cognac and wisdom. Then we came raging through her ancient stone streets, whispered the winds, and crushed her little white-legged school children into the pavement. We sang through walls, came unasked to dinner tables where the rations had run out. We shattered her every window, demolished her every building, sent death gurgling up in her fountains. Mariupol is an agony, said the winds, a laughless tale, a sorry thing, an unsolvable horror, a mass funeral. We have been merciless. Yet Mariupol smiles wryly up from the ruins. I'm a city of light. I am a city of light, and the winds of war will not blacken or halt my fierce defiance. I am a city of light, and will only profit from the flares and rockets flashing in the night sky, and the street fires ablaze, and every candle flickering, and every darkened shelter. Mariupol exists for now amidst the seeming certainty of total destruction. The wind blows. In the marketplace, in the chill breeze, a citizen holding a trembling dog clutches his jacket tight to his throat, closes his eyes, and says to the wind, "Tell the world we are a city of light and are not afraid of being extinguished. And not afraid of being extinguished, only of being forgotten." So that's
Very nice.
Yeah.
Mariupol. The book of poetry is quite personal, and you recently recorded it when You See My Mother asked you to dance for an audiobook edition. Having done a couple myself, I'm wondering what the experience was like for you, because it is an experience.
It was fantastic. I didn't want to go into a studio, so we went into a little bungalow that's on my property and realized after the first hour, because my son had his equipment there and I had a producer from LA produce some of my albums, and about half an hour in, we realized that I'm in a flight pattern. And so we did all the poetry between planes. And sometimes you left them in, and we left chickens squawking out in the yard. And so that's how it came together. And also, you know how they opened it up saying, Audible presents. Well, this is Blackstone, and I said, Blackstone presents When You See My Mother Ask You to Dance by Joan Baez. So, and I heard from them today, and they don't want it that way, but we don't have it any other way, so I'm going to have to live with it. We had a wonderful time.
So you finished the book in the bungalow. You didn't have to be moved to an actual studio.
Well, we were in charge of what we were doing.
Oh.
They're lucky to get what they get. Let's put it that way.
I had a director who was working remotely from Los Angeles, and he made me slow down my speech by about 50%.
Yeah.
Were you told by the director to slow down?
No, there was no director. I just try to remember to slow down.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, amazing. I have heard that you have been a fan of audiobooks for a long time. Why is that?
Because I don't read. That's really the answer. I'm terrible at reading, but I'm happy to listen. I can do a lot of other things while I'm listening.
Okay, but so you still read. It's just a different
You can put it that way.
form
Yeah.
of reading. Okay. So everyone I've told that I am seeing you tonight has had a similar response. They have seen you too, usually at a concert or a protest march. I had a birthday call from Jan Wenner, founder and former publisher of Rolling Stone, fellow Capricorn. Both of us born on January 7th.
Gotcha.
He is 79, I'm a year older. And when I mentioned you and this event, he told me that you were the subject of his very first interview when he was at Sunday Ramparts before he got the idea for Rolling Stone. He said he saw you at Enrico's somewhere and asked for the interview. Do you remember this?
Somewhere, Enrico's?
Somewhere. Or somewhere besides Enrico. Vesuvio's maybe? I don't know.
I remember Enrico's.
Ah, yes. You're a better drinker than I am. But would you be approached by young journalists at that time to sit and talk with them?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. When I came into public view, then started my relationship with the press and interviews and all that, and always tried to keep it something interesting and, something outside of the box.
Mm-hmm. In your incredible documentary, I Am a Voice, you talk about your dissociative disorder, your multiple personalities. Did some of your poems or other writings include maybe contributions from some of your inner voices?
That's correct, yeah. They do. I mean, it was an interesting time period. I was diagnosed with multiple personalities and came to know them, and it's very difficult for somebody to sort of grasp that. It was difficult for me to grasp it, even as it was going on. But these little inner types are very creative. And so a lot of the poems in here were, should we say, heavily influenced by these, and sometimes just outright written by them, and they even get signed their name in here.
And how do you call these inner voices to the surface, such as it were? Do you meditate and then they come to you? Or?
No, they just come. I mean, that's one of the problems, that as you kind of calm things down, try to get the reins back in my hands, because for a while there, it's just follow the bouncing ball. There's one and then another. But I love them all, and they're quiet right now.
Do you work on a legal pad or a computer or a tablet or what?
I started, most of this poetry was just handwritten, yeah. and then I put it in the computer. And by the way, we couldn't find it. I decided 3 years ago I wanted to do a book of poetry, so I started looking everywhere for the poems, and they were everywhere. And I asked my office assistant, you check the storage, you check. So she checked everywhere and got tons of it, but there was this one poem I wanted, and I described it, and she said, I have a vague memory. She found a 40-year-old computer, and it had this poem on it. She couldn't get it off. She had to transcribe the whole thing, but yeah, she had found some of the poetry.
Well, let's hear one of your outer voices now with one of the most beautiful poems in the collection. It is on page 33, and it is called Lily. 33. Okay, Lily. Lily lived in a farmhouse at the edge of town where the air smelled of a pea factory just down the road and the alfalfa field just this side of it. Lily had black eyes and clear skin like white hand soap, a mean dad, a hayloft, chickens, and 4 older brothers who made me dream. Lily and I were 8 years old and best friends. Her lower jaw worked in a fascinating way when she talked in her soft voice and yodeled for me in the echoey bathroom of the one-room schoolhouse. Lily's family was Mennonite, so she had long braids like rope, which she hated. Lily ran off and got married as soon as she turned 16. Decades later, I stopped in Buffalo and saw her and her kids. She had hair so short, the back of her neck was shaved around the nape. She gave me a card and laughed and said she had a little business making silk roses. She was the same sweet Lily. She even yodeled for me. She was the same sweet, beautiful Lily who gave me a chicken leg 40 years earlier when school let out and my family had to move west, so I took it with me in a paper sack on the long drive, and when I got homesick, I pulled it out and yanked on the tendons to make the claws bend. That's sort of like writing backwards, you know. But it began to stink, and I had to throw it away in the desert, and I cried because as it went flying out the car window, a big blast of air came in and hit me in the face, and I thought I smelled the pea factory and the alfalfa field and the dusty hay, and I thought I saw Lily's clear skin and black eyes and her 4 handsome brothers thundering alongside our station wagon, bareback on ponies, and they kidnapped me and took me to the mountains where Lily was waiting, her long hair hanging loose in the wind, the princess of the lakes, with a deerskin dress for me, the daughter of the moon, come home. Lovely. Sweet Lily. Before the poetry, there was the singing. Before the singing, there was the guitar, and before that, another instrument that got you into the music quite easily. Tell us how Joan came to be musical.
Musical family. My mom, probably if she'd had a chance to do something with her voice, she had a beautiful voice. My dad, we were a family of harmonizers, so we played something at the piano. We were all just there, finding a part. It was very natural.
What kind of songs would they be?
Oh God, Christmas stuff. You know, Christmas stuff. And then I don't even remember, but they were harmonizable songs, and we just gathered there.
And how did you decide later on to focus on folk music? And now by this time you're in Cambridge, and there's a good folk scene there and a great club there, the 47. How did you gravitate toward that and to the music and the people there?
Well, when I was about 15 or 16, I was listening to rhythm and blues on my little plastic bedside radio late into the night, which distressed my parents because I wasn't studying and because it was degenerate music. My mother saw the cover of Johnny Ace's album. You remember that thing? And he was rhythm and blues star, died very young, blew his own brains out playing Russian roulette. Says something about him. But my mother looked at the cover and saw him. She said, "Oh, he looks like a drug addict." And I said, "He is not," but I didn't know what the drug addict was. And I protected him anyway. And anyway, at some point, my aunt took me to see Pete Seeger nearby, and I was just say it was like a good vaccine. It took, and it made sense to me. I was already politicized in a sense from my family's pacifism, and so then it went from Pete Seeger to Harry Belafonte, Odetta, and on and like that.
The best.
Yeah.
Cream of the crop. Wow. And you would then move on to New York City at some point.
Boston. I never
Just
spent
Boston. Oh, but you wound up the one night at least at Gertie's.
couple nights.
Yeah, Folk City, and that's where you met Robert
There we
Zimmerman.
go. I got it right in time. That's
Yes.
where I met Robert Zimmerman.
Yes, on a hoot night, I believe it was.
I guess it was.
What was a hoot night anyway?
Hootenanny. Hootenanny met anybody could get up. It's like open mic. Open mic.
Jam session, yeah. And what was your impression of him?
Of who?
Of Dylan. Of Mr. Gertie. Yeah. Right. Oh yeah, you remember Bobby.
What was my impression? He needed a bath. That was my honest assessment.
And what was your impression of him when you heard him sing with that voice of his?
I never minded his voice. It was.
What a rave review.
It's a rave, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I mean, people were on about they wouldn't listen to him because of the voice. I thought, it was a strange voice. But let me read you this. It's called Portrait, and it's this was a little exercise and write something that in the fashion of E.E. Cummings. So the way I did it on the in the Audible one says, Robert Zimmerman, blue-eyed son from Duluth, used to scribble thought dreams, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like that. Brilliant stuff. He was a brilliant kid. And what I want to know is who's writing that kind of shit today, Mr. Creator? In the book, it says stuff. I just say.
Well, as the kids say, you did finally hook up at
We hooked up.
some point.
He took that bath, and we hooked up. I got
Put your
you.
rub on that hook. All right. Well, so what happened was then that you had opportunities to observe him actually writing, because you knew his songs were really quite brilliant in many
Yeah.
cases, right? And to see him creating it, what was his MO? Was it a yellow pad or that typewriter we see
Typewriter,
in
it's a
numerous documentaries?
Yeah, it's a typewriter, yeah. And no, it was just extraordinary. He's clearly channeling from somewhere none of us will ever know. And it just kind of poured out. It was wonderful to watch.
You are rightfully credited with really helping to jumpstart his career by having him with you on stage, introducing him to
A reluctant
different
audience.
What audience?
A reluctant audience. Because they came to hear my achingly pure soprano. So when Bob came out there, you couldn't hear the words. They didn't know he was a genius yet. So I said, listen to this guy. Listen to this guy. And not very long after that, they started listening to
They came around, and by '65 he was an ultra star, and but he didn't pay you the same kind of courtesy. He invited you to go with him to London and to England, for different parts of England, but he performed and didn't call you up the way you called him up.
Well, you shouldn't be surprised. He's not as generous in that sense. But, that whatever issues I had about Bob and hurt feelings and just stuff that goes on and on and on. And then one day I was in the art studio, I was painting him, a picture of when he was really young. And I thought, well, I'll put his music on. I put his music on, and I started to cry. And I painted that thing for hours and cried the whole time. And all of the stuff washed away. All that was left was appreciation that I knew him. and got to sing his songs all the way through, from the beginning to the last concerts. Yeah.
And you were able to write a song about the experience of being with him, Diamonds and Rust, that became one of your bigger hits.
It was the only big hit.
Oh, come on.
No, it
No.
was.
You had two.
Thank you. I was just going to say I had two, and you were there.
I did my research.
You did.
Let's see here.
You come me to the next one of
Yeah,
these with
this
me.
was an optional question to move it up in the list here. You have said you were not a hit maker, that the only two singles of yours that made the charts were The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down
That's correct.
and Diamonds and Rust. Yeah, so there you are. So through
You're
the
the
years...
only person who ever had nerve to say you had two hits. And the journalists say, and all those hits, and I'll say, name me more than two. Well, you know, all those hits.
Yeah.
I wasn't a hit maker.
But
I was the
really, there
good-
are so many songs that friends and fans and the general public identify as your song. There But for Fortune Go I, for example.
right, yeah.
I mean, not be a hit on Billboard, but still a hit with many, many millions. So there you are.
Thank you.
And they- And I saw a short documentary called Painted Passport. I think it was around 2009, where Dylan said that he loved Diamonds and Rust and described your voice as a heart-stopping soprano voice. What was your response when you heard those remarks?
I'll tell you a better one than that. When I went on the second Rolling Thunder, and Bob and I, we weren't having a happy time then. And he hadn't even said hello, and I hadn't said hello. And he came, and Diamonds and Rust was out, and it was a hit. So Dylan came up and he said, "You can do that one about, you can sing the one about the blue eyes? You know, the robin's eggs and shit." I said, "Oh, you mean the one I wrote about my ex-husband?" And he went, and I never amended that.
Well, there is an elephant in the room, and that would be that a lot of the people here, from just talking with a few of them, all saw the movie.
The movie.
The Chalamet movie.
My doppelganger.
Your what? Your
My doppelganger.
Yeah. So before we talk about Monica, let's just, you see the film yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw the film.
Well,
I
as
enjoyed
everybody is asking, what did you think?
I enjoyed it. I mean, it's a work of fiction, and I appreciate, a lot of it was real. I mean, a lot of it was, and the atmosphere, they picked it up pretty well, I thought. Monica, we text back and forth. She said, "Oh, let me know what you think of it." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you ahead of time, I'm going with my movie group, and if we like it, we'll stand up and cheer, and if we don't, we'll throw milk duds at the screen." So we didn't throw any milk duds. I think there was way too much male stuff. I mean, Pete Seeger did not introduce Bob to the world, but in the film, all the men take credit for, it's the boys' club, Anyway, so that aside, it was fun.
But couldn't it be said that the Village scene was kind of a boys' club?
It was all, I mean, in that sense, it was accurate.
Yeah,
The film
right.
was accurate.
Because when you think back to those times, who was there who was a female and doing well besides Carolyn Hester maybe, or
yeah.
Barbara Dane, or Odetta? That was about it. But the people who owned the clubs, who booked the clubs, and who ran the
right, yeah.
folk music library museum, all guys.
We were still chicks.
Yes, that's you were. Now, your character responds to a remark by Dylan about your songs by saying, "You're kind of an Bob." And then coming on stage at Newport, you, behind your guitar, so the public couldn't see it, you flip them the finger. The character does. Does that ring true?
Oh, and there was two of them.
I'm trying to figure out which one's carrying the pick. Oh, my.
Why don't we switch gears a little bit here?
Was that?
Can we switch gears? Again?
So Well, but you did say it was fiction. You used that word to ascribe to it. What was the
No,
most...
no, I don't mean fiction. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
it was a movie. It wasn't a documentary. It wasn't
Oh, no.
intending to be, so.
Sure,
So sky's the limit.
yes. They always consolidate characters into one. For example, the Elle Fanning character was probably a couple of different girlfriends, I don't know. The performers too. And you missed out a bunch of people, aside from Bobby Newworth. In Greenwich Village, you didn't really see much of a Dave Van Ronk or the Clancy brothers
Right,
or
yeah.
some of the many others who were prime. Tom Paxton.
Well, what would Dylan want them in the movie for?
Make it about me.
Yeah.
All right. You know, I think we both did Dylan at the Sweetwater.
You still going to talk about Dylan?
Separately, yeah. We're still, yes, just a little bit more, just a little more. Because I'm fascinated.
Oh, sorry. You're fascinated. I'm bored.
Well, you may be bored, but they're not. I do want to ask. You're bored? Enough? All right. Okay. Well, even if you're bored or you're over him, the fact is one of the seemingly great pleasures in your life and career is doing Dylan. That you infuse a
You're
bit
not
of
gonna start
Dylan
with-
in a simple
You do
twist
your
of-
version.
a simple twist of fate, or in Love is just a four-letter word in the Scorsese documentary.
I could do Brando just as well.
You just got to lapse
I
into
could
it
do Brando.
easily.
This is Napoleonic code. We got some called Napoleonic code.
But you did have a fun time lapsing into it here and there. You know, whether it's at the Rolling Thunder or Bread and Roses or
Who, Brando?
you, Dylan. We're still on Dylan. We'll get to Marlon a bit later, and then later on De Niro. I did Bob Dylan at on a. Oh, all right. Okay, let's talk about your social awakening. Now you heard.
Why don't we read a poem instead?
Oh, hang on. Sure, just choose one of your choice.
I will. Okay, this one's called This Little Piggy. This little piggy played the violin. Oh, by the way, on the audio, this is in a Cockney accent. So this little piggy played the violin. This little piggy played drums. This little piggy played sticks and boughs. And this little piggy played none. And the last little piggy ran and ran and ran all the way home, hearing the lovely trio in his head. And he got so excited he wet himself, which is where the wee, wee, wee comes from. And soon thereafter, he taught himself to play piccolo and stay dry.
That segues right into Martin Luther King here now. No, I do want to ask you about your having met Dr. King and several other pivotal people as a teenager. You were 16 probably when you first heard him speak.
Yes, I was.
Right.
Really done your research. Yeah, I was, and that changed my life.
Yeah, what was the impact? Why
Well, I was already in the nonviolence and activism, and I was with a group of students who had a gathering from all over, kids from all over the country, and it was to discuss politics and nonviolence and all that. So, and each year they would have a speaker, and the year I was there was King. And he came out and started to speak, and I just started to cry, and I wept through the entire speech of his. And then I don't even remember when I met him face to face, because that's how I remember him. He has to be 29 or something. My God, he was so young. And the fascination was that I'd been studying about and reading about nonviolence, and then suddenly here's this person who is actually doing it and involved in it and leading people in their, bus boycotts in Mississippi, and it was just mind-blowing to me because it made it real, and it took my next few steps into that activism.
And conversely, when was it that Dr. King first heard you
I don't know.
singing at a gathering, for example?
Probably long before the March on Washington, because we were already buds by then. He used to say, I love having Joan Baez sit next to me when I'm preaching, because as soon as I say the word nonviolence, she starts to cry. And I did.
You at one point said, I am addicted to the activism. And as you say, it began with your Quaker parents, and that you read Anne Frank at age 16, another influence on you in your teen years. Given all your life of crusading for social justice and for nonviolence and against wars, against violence anywhere in the world, what do you think now of what we're going through with the return of the Orange Agent?
Well, I don't think any of us could have dreamed what's happening and what's happened. We knew the signs, 50 years of think tanks working towards this, but I think when people say, well, is this as bad as the 60s? I think, we couldn't have written this. It makes the 60s look like a garden party, really, it does. So, and I find that, well, there's a concert coming up. It's a tribute to me, so there are a lot of other singers. And I thought, okay, we take a big rainbow flag right in back of us all and put one in the lobby and put a table that says, in Spanish and English, what you can do if ICE comes to your door, what your rights are. So as soon as there is a way to make yourself clear in resistance, then you do it. And I couldn't think of anything until it came so naturally to me, just realizing I would be on stage, that it just, and it's interesting, as soon as you start doing something, you have the feeling you're doing something, whether it's, and I think right now what's really important, and I've always said it, but now it's ringing bells more so with me, which is little victories and big defeats. Because we are in a massive defeat right now, in avalanches of evil. So the little victories, each one that we have, becomes really important. And a friend of mine pointed out that the nice thing about fascism is you don't have to do anything. You just have to say no. You just have to, instead of saying yes, you say no. And you don't really initially have to go to a bunch of meetings. You just start in where you are. And it turns out really that being joyful or dancing becomes an act of resistance, because they don't want to hear about that.
In an article, an interview with the New York Times a few years ago, you said, I know about the pendulum theory. Politics swing left to right, imperfect democracy to fascism, but no one could have predicted the current wrecking ball. And what to do about it? Keep your head up or down if you are passing the Proud Boys on the street, and make good trouble wherever and whenever you can. You stand by that, of course.
I do, yeah.
Okay. Also, you wrote a song about President Trump, didn't you, at one point? Right?
I don't remember it. I know it was a good song. But
Nasty Man.
Nasty Man, yeah, well, that was mild. That was complimentary.
He had it easy there. Many pop, rock, other artists go on tour, doing concerts, promoting themselves, making dough. You often traveled for none of those reasons, but to participate in protests in the Deep South, in Argentina, in Vietnam, in Chile, in Sarajevo. These are risky, downright dangerous ventures. I wonder what compelled you to make those trips.
I mean, I can't name it. It was just natural. It was like breathing. At one point, I remember I said, okay, none of this political stuff. I'm just work on my albums. I work on my music. And literally 2 hours later, somebody called from Sarajevo. Can you come here? People have no connection with the outside world. And of course, I mean, it's partly because nobody else can do what I've done. However the stars line up, I was kind of a spearhead, and I would show up, and it received a kind of publicity that I assumed it would and hoped for, and then that was how I lived.
As you said, also another time, I was the right voice at the right time.
Yeah.
Use that voice for good purposes. Here's maybe a challenge for you. I don't know.
Oh boy, I don't know. We've had a
When
couple.
you composed the piece called Maybe, and that's on page 39
Okay.
in your book, but it's got a jazzy beat era rhythm to it, to my ears anyway, with run on and runaway sentences. This is
Okay.
called Maybe.
Maybe, yeah. How idiotic, 16 years old, never been kissed. Well, not really, maybe tonight. I like the way this Johnny smells and the feel of his arms, his collar turned up, and maybe he likes me too in the turquoise darkness of his truck. He slows down on the dead streets of my neighborhood. Maybe my mother and father are asleep. Maybe the lights will be out, so Johnny turns off the engine a half a block from the house. Maybe we will glide to just under the street lamp or just past it to the black shadows of the neighbor's magnolia tree. Johnny knows. Maybe I should say something. Maybe I should duck my head. Maybe I won't appear so stupid or unappealing. Maybe I have the Indian princess look, especially here in the dim glow of the light from the radio that he's clicking off now. So maybe, oops, it's all dark. Maybe it's time to get out. Thanks, it was really nice. Maybe Friday, maybe. Oh, stop me, please. Don't let me go so quickly. Maybe you know exactly how I feel. So flustered. There's your arm. Maybe you love me in some way. Maybe I love you. Well, maybe I love your mouth. In the shadows and the smell of roses from my mother's little garden, along the edge of our lawn, your mouth. Maybe it should fit on mine like my drawings of couples kissing. What happens? Do I tilt my head like this? Oh, I thought it would be drier. I have to go now. My parents will be angry. Maybe they're right. Maybe you're not supposed to do that, what I just did. Christ, it was only a kiss in the dark. I am a fool. Maybe I'll look different in the light in the mirror. Maybe he thinks I'm an idiot. Maybe I am.
No maybes about it. That was great. And can you recall creating that piece and whether or not, do you sometimes have music on in the background as you're writing poetry?
No, not usually, no.
To me, there was a sort of a nice rhythmic beat to it. And I was just wondering if you may have had something else in your head going on.
Probably lots going on in my head.
What are the differences between writing a poem and composing a song? Because we just heard a poem that probably could be turned into kind of a song.
Most of my musician friends agree with me that they don't really have much to do with each other, the poems, writing poetry and writing songs. That was my experience anyway, because I thought, ooh, I've got this great poem. I'll turn it into a song. Not so much. I didn't have much success with it. And a lot of writers agree with that.
Okay. What inspired the next one you are going to grace us with, Flying Naked Over the Blue Lake, which is kind of a free bird of a poem. It's on page 43.
Okay. This is the closest thing to sex that goes anywhere in my writing that I'm sharing.
Interesting.
Fun.
Yeah, because I was going to say it reminds me of your candor and openness in interviews and in the documentary I Am a Voice. So this is Flying Naked.
Flying naked over the blue lake. And when I fly over the blue lake, I haven't a stitch covering my body, and I look down at the blue so far away. Ahoy there! I can feel the wind like feathers all over me on my stomach and my chest and on my legs and between my legs, like a bird might feel in flight. I'm warmth and bones and nerves and blood and muscle, all wrapped up in bare skin stretched tight, just skin between me and the wind like feathers touching from the outside that make me want more pleasure and more as I fly with my arms stretched out to the sides and my legs in a floating V looking down over the endless blue lake.
so, what inspired that?
A dream. A dream.
A dream.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Got off the hook with that one, didn't I?
I want to ask about your family members who are all represented in this book of poetry. Your father, Albert, who passed away in 2007, young at 70. Your mom, Joan Chando.
He wasn't 70. He was 94.
Oh, I'm sorry.
19 whatever, something.
Oh, wow.
He was 94.
Okay. And your mom, Joan Chandos Baez, also known as Joan Sr., passed away in April of 2013 after reaching age 100.
Yes, I have to tell you one brief one about that. My mom was sort of like me. Anyway, she was approaching her 100th birthday, which she wanted to reach. When she was 92, she said she'd stick around as long as we kept entertaining her. And after a while, she got bored of the entertainment. She said, 100. So we're 3 months away from the 100th birthday, and we're saying, we could do this and we could do that. Wouldn't you like? I said, Mom, what do you want to do on your birthday? And she said, drop dead. And 1 week after, she was gone. Yeah.
Wow. Timing.
Timing's everything.
Right. So you write about your father gently in the poem Nowadays, but in the piece In My Day, you hint at secrets you revealed in your documentary. You write about forgiving him, about how he didn't remember being part of generational evil, and how the children themselves will remember nothing until quite suddenly they do when they are half a century old.
Yeah.
Not easy to turn such revelations into poems. What were you writing about there?
Childhood abuse, bluntly, and the important thing to me being that I don't think my parents or anybody I knew involved remembers anything. And then I think, well, if I blocked it out for half a century and I wanted to discover this stuff and it took work, I can't imagine why my parents would want to, dig any of it up. That makes sense.
And as you said, you heal without letting the secrets out. And so you did.
And forgiving. And forgiving.
All right. As for your mother, you remember her in My Beautiful Young Mom in the book. And the magnum opus of When You See My Mother is the title poem, a work that really flows through 9 gorgeous pages, where your average poem is actually a couple of pages.
Yeah.
This is a fantasy story, you have said, about your mother falling in love with a Swedish opera singer.
Who does exist, he does, yeah.
So it's 9 pages long, we can't have that, but I have to read the conclusion. And don't worry, there's no spoiler here. And she stands, a frozen silhouette against the splendor of the present. It's said the spirit has no fixed age when it awakens to its change of circumstance. But I think it is the age of a certain moment of exquisite chance. So when you see my mother, ask her to dance. How did you come to create this one?
The voice of it was, his name is Jussi Björling. He was the opera singer when I was as far back as I can remember, 6, 7 years old. Mom played, well, they played a lot of classical music, but this was one of her favorites that I would hear over and over again, and I fell in love with the voice as well. So it was my whole lifetime. My mom took me to his concert, Björling's concert, and it was in Boston. And they have this kind of sweet memory of it because he had canceled. And he was an alcoholic. He probably was, on a drunk somewhere. But the sign just said, canceled. And looking back, I just appreciate my mom so much for even getting me that far. We probably went back and listened to his music, which I still do.
How was it for you doing the audiobook, reading that piece? Was that emotional for you?
No, no. There were only a couple of times that I got emotional about poems, and that's too. I like that one. It has a happy ending.
Yeah. You also write poems for your sisters, Queen of the Mountains for your older sister Pauline, and Just Because for your younger sister Mimi. Oh, speaking of Mimi, well, actually, for both of them, what kind of sibling rivalries were there in the Baez household?
God. Well, Pauline was smart enough to just bow out of it when we were quite young. She, not interested, just not interested in any of it. And Mimi and I were at each other's throats without even knowing it.
Wow.
For
Over what? Just sisterly things?
Well, yeah. Okay. I think what happens is the early abuse sets everything cockeyed, So that was at the root of our problems. But then the thing was that Mimi, I was just overbearing, and that comes out in the film. That I got to see. I learned a lot when I watched my own documentary because I wasn't there for it. I gave the keys to somebody, opened up the storage unit, and it's all yours. So I didn't know what was happening in that film till it was done. Now I forget what I was saying. What was I saying?
Well, it's all right. We're going to go
on to the next
your
one.
poem about Mimi, for Mimi. It is called Just Because.
Yeah.
It's on page 132.
Yeah. I think just towards the end, I think it was too painful for Mimi. We were glued to each other. We were so close. And then when things interfered with that, I think it happens towards the end. They can't face the sorrow or whatever it would involve remaining close to that person who's leaving. So, yeah, this is about Mimi going off to Switzerland, thinking maybe she had cancer, and fought at every possible way. It's called Just Because. Just because you were ill and frail and ice-filled and hated us all didn't mean we would give up on you, little sister. When you'd had enough of Western meds, the hypodermics of poison, the MRIs, the brain fog, the morphine patches, and the pretending, we tried potions and crystals, tumor whisperers, praying nuns, homeopathic granules, and telepathic white light. Then Switzerland. We'd heard of miraculous cures from there. On the way to the airport, I tried to give you my most precious prayer beads, but you turned your head to the window and said, I already have some. Maybe in Switzerland they would fill your veins with gold and flood your tumors with light and return you to us whole and full of forgiveness. And I saw that when I inched closer to your well-guarded boundaries, my very presence was unbearable to you. We were bonded to one another in love, but the complexities of our lives had left us at each other's mercy, and no place around was there safety to be found. Switzerland sparked hope in you, and the forces in your life that kept you mummified went briefly idled. In your absence, I went off to meditate on a cold hillside with Buddhists and turkeys, wild turkeys, mad crows, and the full moon. While you were in Switzerland, you could breathe on your own in your small, immaculate room, but the miracle we'd prayed for hadn't come, and you were left exhausted. Back home in the airport, you turned to us, raised your arm in the air, feigning an opera diva, and attempted a triumphant high note, but your voice, weakened by illness, had lost its strength and beauty. The high note stopped prematurely and ended in a little cough that became ragged and spasmodic and didn't bring anything up, but stayed dry as dust. Mimi, my beautiful little sister, you danced with death until you were spent. Its long shadow finally enveloped you and stole you away from those you love and those you hated. But surely, just because we were clumsy and desperate and in your way, didn't mean you would give up on us.
Lovely. For that Chronicle piece, I mentioned a profile of Mimi. She mentioned one time in traffic seeing you by chance in your car. She was in hers, and she said you were listening to a tape of her new album. Quote, and I thought, what a strange relationship. Here she is, an international celebrity, and she's listening to my tape. What a responsibility she has toward this little sister who idolized her to the point of becoming a singer. This person who doesn't quite cut the mustard the way she can, and yet she needs to be supportive, to show criticism when necessary. And, well, I wouldn't want to be in her shoes.
Which one? Either of us.
Your shoes.
Yeah.
Or sandals, or whatever you're wearing, yes. Or the time you were not wearing shoes for
Right.
years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Even my
okay.
non-shoes.
All right. Now, besides Dylan, there are your poems for Leonard Cohen, Judy Collins, Jimi Hendrix, possibly others. One would think you knew Judy well, but did you? She followed you as a...
Yeah, no, I didn't know her well. I didn't appreciate her as much as I do now, just for being the lovely person she is. And I had a chance to tell her that at her 80th birthday party, and I just thanked her because when Mimi's husband, Richard, died, I was in Poland or somewhere, and I thought, oh, I must come rushing home. And they said, no. And I realized later how important that was. Judy came out and helped take care of Mimi. If I'd been there, there wouldn't be enough oxygen in the room for all those other people. And they were wonderful, and they took care of her. And that's how I know Judy.
And your piece on Jimi Hendrix gives us Jimi from your POV at Woodstock yourself, because you were part of that craziness. Page 94.
Well, this is about Isle of Wight, and it talks about him in general, but yeah, this particular one, the imagery came from Isle of Wight. It's called Jimi. You performed just before me at the Isle of Wight and somehow lit the stage on fire. I performed in your wake as the aftermath flickered down through the floodlights. I sang, strike another match, go start anew, and look out, saints are coming through. You were no saint, but you certainly came through. You came through like a magnificent natural disaster, like a fucking volcano. At Woodstock, you eviscerated the national anthem and made it your own. There were no bombs bursting in air and rockets' red glare. There was only your guitar and 400,000 souls electrified in the dawn's early light, out there in the mud, out there in the volcanic ash. And you were only 27 when you died.
Right. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
So, Joan, you did concert tours until the end of a European tour in July of 2019, if I have this correct. Last show in Madrid at Teatro Real. What were the main factors in your decision to give up touring, if not doing concerts, solo concerts?
The voice. When I was in my 30s and I had a wonderful vocal coach, and I said, oh, by the way, how will I know when it's time to quit? And he said, your voice will tell you. And it did. It just began getting harder and harder to sing. For anybody, the vocal cords are a muscle, and they start, getting weaker and weaker, and it takes more and more exercise to keep them going. And I was keeping them going, but not very happy with the sound I was hearing. So little by little, that became clear to me. And we took, my manager and I took 3 years planning it out, and I think it was the right time. And I'm happy I made that decision. So when people say, oh, you're retired, I'm retired from touring. And I'm happy to say that, and I'm happy that it happened. And then when I came home, I got to do all this other stuff.
Right. It is quite a different thing doing a tour where you're doing the concert pretty much every day for 3 or 4 days, and then a break maybe for travel, and then another 3 or 4 in a row, as opposed to select concerts where you can store up your energy and...
Or select
strength.
readings.
And readings now, yes. All right. You have sung many, many kinds of songs like nobody else could sing them. And in your book, there's a piece about God songs on page 62, Joan.
Yeah.
Would you do us the honor of reading that?
Yeah. God songs. The God songs cast upon the air from minuscule throats in feather veiled coats, coax in the dawn. hailing me ever on, unfailingly. May I respond this day to life and love as eloquently and as faithfully as they.
Beautiful. Speaking of the voice and changes with passage of time, what do you do to maintain your good health? In the documentary, I think we saw you working with a trainer.
No, that was that was Ruth Ginsburg. She was. She's.
You dance.
I dance, but I also have a trainer now. If I caved. I didn't want. I went into a physical therapist about 4 years ago. I said I don't want to fall because I had started really balance problems and had started falling actually. And I've worked really, really hard. This is physical therapy, treadmill, walking. The walking is really important, and other stuff. Just keep moving. Recently, the last go-around started with my son, jumped in the pool, which is now 52 degrees. And for the morning to get things rolling, so of course, Mom trots down there. So I do it now. I was getting ready for Ireland because they have this thing where they all jump in the ocean. It's called a 40-foot. So I thought, oh, great, that's what I'll do when I get to Ireland. And I did, And the Irish taxi driver said, well, you're already 10 out of 10 here. Now you jumped in the 40-foot, you're 13 out of 10. But my pool at home, which I'm still jumping in, is now 49 degrees. So nanny.
Do you get to see Gabe on a regular? Your son, Gabe.
Yeah.
Who was 3? You depict him at age 3 in the book, right?
Yeah.
He is what now? 50? 55. Yeah, he's now 5. Yeah.
He's now, well, that too.
And he's a musician like you. Does he sing?
Singing is not his main instrument. He plays esoteric percussion, African and South American and Latin and Cuban and all different instruments that I don't even remember the names of.
Wow.
And it started on African drums. And he went, when he was like 18, he went to 18, 20, he went to Senegal and just fell in love with African music and the drums. And my favorite is still the djembe, when he plays the djembe.
You have won scads of awards for your work and also for your work in music. I don't know how many awards you have, but I would imagine a couple of hundred. Of all of those, in whatever field you have earned the awards, do you have those that you are most proud of and cherish? There's
this one somebody gave me in the shape of an acorn, where the little lid comes off. I don't remember which one it was, but there are little favorites that are lying around the house. By the end of this evening, I'll have remembered where it came from, because I think it's the San Francisco area. But it's just, but awards in general, I'm not very good at. I figure whatever gifts I have are gifts to me. So, I'm lucky to have them with me, but I don't take, for instance, The Voice, I don't take much credit for except maintenance and delivery. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. And keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let no hate and bigotry turn me around, no, turn me around. Turn me around, ain't gonna let no hate and bigotry turn me around. And keep on walking, keep on talking, keep on singing, keep on swinging, marching up to freedom land.
Yeah. love the video of you and Justin Jones from the Tennessee Three running into each other at an airport. Was
Newark
it Nashville?
Airport. It's the best thing that
Newark?
ever happened in Newark Airport.
And going into that song, Impromptu.
Yeah.
That was wonderful.
Just before it, he said, I just met him, Justin. And so we ran into each other as we're getting off the plane. And he looks at me, he says, my grandmother would kill me if you didn't sing with me. And so we broke into that song.
Oh, man. Well, thank you for everything, Joan, and thanks reading from her book, When You See My Mother, Ask Her to Dance, published by Godine in Boston.
Yeah.
I'm Ben Fontours with thanks for joining us here at the Commonwealth Club World Affairs in San Francisco. One more time, ladies and gentlemen, Joan Baez.
Thank you. I think they're good stand-ups.
All right. Thank you, Ben.